Welcome to Harem series of Naruto episode 22. Naruto with Tenten. In Konoha, Naruto was currently getting ready for the mission that was taking him and Tenten to the land of the sea. There was a band of renegade ninjas who had managed to steal some vital documents from the land of T, and due to the ruling clan head being Tsunade's friend, he had asked for aid from her. Tsunade was more than willing to send down some help for her friend, and now here he was with Tenten. He had been surprised to discover that he was going alone with Tenten and the other teams were elsewhere. His teammates were rather busy with Sai being dragged away by his friend Ino, and Sakura was asked to handle some critical loads back in the Konoha hospital. Kakashi was also elsewhere along with Yamato and Jiraiya to oversee some data on Akatsuki, and the other teams were also doing other things as well. Guy was on assignment and so was Lee. He was actually expecting Neji to be along with them, but it seemed that the Jonin was busy on other matter. Kurenai's team were currently taking a break due to Kurenai soon expecting her child, and it seemed that the same could be said for Asuma's own team, as well as Asuma was now going to be a dad. As for Guy, he was busy elsewhere, and since Neji was a Jonin already, he took over for the leadership spot for the rest of the time as their sensei was busy dealing with some critical assignments for the village. Lee was the same as ever but had some matters of his own, so that left him with Tenten. He did not mind, as despite not having worked with her for a very long time, he had a good deal of respect for Tenten. She was by far one of the skilled kunoichi around, and the fact that she was on friendly terms with him made it a load easier to deal with. As they had taken the mission, he had to make sure that he had all that he needed for whatever mess the two of them were going to get themselves roped into. The mission was not exactly easy, since the stolen documents were pretty much hidden away once they got to the land of sea several days later. And the ninja themselves happened to be a mix of Jonin and Chunin, which explained why was it that they were able to steal those documents. The two of them had a lot to deal with once they got to the land of Sean, and they both had to use everything they had in their arsenal to beat the ninja in question. But once they were able to do so, they managed to get the documents back, and Naruto had them given to his friend Gamakachi, who was quick to send those documents back to Konoha to be seen by Tsunade if they were the genuine articles that they were sent to recover. They had managed to lock down the renegade ninja a few days later when Gamakachi came back and informed them that they had gotten the right documents and they could go home as soon as they were able to do so. And that was something that Naruto was very pleased to know, and soon they were off to the docks to finally get the ship that would be going back to the Land of Fire. On the boat back to the Land of Fire, the blonde shinobi was now currently in his room and was twirling one of his kunai, though he made sure not to throw it on either the walls, floor, or ceiling, since there was a chance that the captain of the ship that he was on with Tenten was not going to be happy if the ship was damaged. The blonde shinobi thought over what he was going to do once he was home, and also to locate Sasuke. It was usually something that he had to deal with, since many would have called him foolish to look for Sasuke, after all the things that the former Konoha ninja had done. And he had never forgotten how Sasuke had attacked him with the Chidori, but he had no intention of taking back his promise to Sakura. He was doing it to help her, to make her happy, and to also try and steer Sasuke away from the path of hatred. He had no desire to see Sasuke go even deeper into darkness, and wanted to see him return to the guy he knew. That was a long shot at best, but it was worth it all, at least to him. He wanted them to be his friends, true friends who stood side by side no matter the odds. It was when his stomach began to growl at him that he recalled that he had yet to eat his lunch. He and Tenten had not been able to go and get breakfast when they came to the docks, since the ship they were on was the last one in dock. And it had taken a very good amount of haggling to convince the captain to take the two of them on as passengers on his ship. The ship was indeed on the way to the Land of Fire, but it was a trading ship and as such was not meant to stay in one place, so they were going to have to leave the ship once it made its port of destination. That might mean that it was going to be in a place that would be a fair distance from home, but he was not going to let that stop him as he got to the galley to see if Tenten herself was going to eat their lunch. Plus he hoped that none of the sailors would try anything on Tenten. He knew that being on the sea for a while can have an effect on guys, so they might start getting ideas in their head, even more so since despite being ninja, there were only two of them. But to his surprise, the men were actually cheering Tenten in the galley, and there was a reason why. She was currently throwing one of her kunai on an ever-distancing target. And it seemed that Tenten was really proving herself to the sailors. It was here that Naruto decided not to interfere with Tenten, since she seemed to have the whole situation under control. So in the meantime he observed as Tenten finally threw her kunai dead center on the target, even after it being at least a full room's distance from her. Not much when one considered Tenten's accuracy in throwing weapons, but still a good feat. Naruto smirked a bit as Tenten got her money from the betting sailors and soon joined him with a slight smile. "Hey, nice to finally see you outside of that room of your, Naruto-kun. I was beginning to think that you were going to be stuck there for the rest of the trip." Thought about it, but decided to go and grab something to eat. Anyway, What happened here? The kunoichi grinned a bit and explained that she took part in a small throwing competition with some of the sailors, and despite the fact that some of them were too sure about her being in their game, they humored her. Only to find out that she was not a simple ninja despite the size and distance of the target, and that was why she was able to win a fairly good amount of ryo. As they moved to their own table to grab their own meals, the two began to relax a lot more as they were all eager to go home and go back to what they were usually doing. However, Naruto was curious about something. He had recently noted that Neji and Tenten seemed to be a bit distant from one another. It was normally not something that he bothered with, but he was curious as to why. There was no bad blood between Neji and Tenten since they still got along well with one another last he had seen, but he did notice it even though it was not his business, and while he was not very close to either Tenten or Neji, he was on good terms with the two as well as Rock Lee. He decided to place that aside though, as the smell of food was now making its way to his nose, and soon there was some food there. It was actually beef stew with some herbs, hard bread, some fresh fruit, and also a good glass of lime juice. Naruto was hoping for ramen, but he realized that since the ship was not a cruise ship, it was limited in the food department. And the smell was good either way as he and Tenten began to dig into their food as they both had the same food. Tenten was happy with the food and thus was not hesitating in eating the food, though she did it with a level of delicacy and manners. Naruto on the other hand was not the one for manners as he ate the way he liked. Tenten did not like that, but the other sailors did not seem to mind as they were eating in the very same fashion as the blonde in question. As soon as they were done eating and drinking, the blonde spoke to the brunette kunoichi. "So where do you think we are going to land, Tenten?" "Not all that sure, Naruto-san. But considering that this ship is a trading vessel, we might stop at the Land of Waves first. The place did become a vital trading port and is considered a great place to buy goods." At the mention of the Land of Waves, Naruto grinned widely and replied, "We're going there. Sweet. I was hoping to see how Tsunami-san, Old Man Tezuna, and Inari are doing now. Plus seeing the bridge they named after me is going to be worth it." Tenten gave the blonde a slight smile as she was able to read up on the mission, or rather hear about it. Many of the people of the Land of Waves who she had met on occasion when she and her team passed through the place had good things to say about Naruto and his team. The bridge that Tezuna had made and named after Naruto had indeed brought prosperity and security to the land, and it was something that Tenten had no doubt Naruto could take a great measure of pride from. Lee himself was quite pleased at the news and vowed that he too would one day be as famous as Naruto was to the people of the Land of Waves. Neji merely smiled a bit inside as he knew that this was going to be something that was not going to be easy to forget. And Guy himself approved as he stated that Naruto's youth was the reason he prevailed. As for her, to see a bridge named after the blonde was amusing, and the people who she spoke to had told her of Tsunami and Inari, who were the ones who were touched by Naruto the most. "You really miss them, huh, Naruto-san?" Naruto nodded with a grin, and they were soon able to relax. But they were not going to be relaxing for long as one of the crew members rushed in and shouted out a warning to everyone in the galley. "Pirates!" That was a cry that no one who lived in the sea and worked in it wanted to hear as they all rushed out to where they held their weapons. Naruto and Tenten were soon joining them, and they looked at the ships following the trading vessel. Tenten summoned out a telescope and looked to see that there were a large number of armed men and women there. And they might be on pirate vessels due to the design and the flags of a notorious pirate group. But they were not pirates. They were ninja. "Those are not pirates. They are ninja. I think they must be after us." Naruto wondered just why Tenten said that, but he knew that was not the right time to be arguing on the details on who was chasing who. They decided to stop the enemy ninja cold in their tracks before the people on the ship got dragged into a fight that none of them had any stake in. He turned to Tenten and spoke to her seriously. "We have to stop them here, Tenten-san. The captain and his crew don't have to be dragged into this fight." Tenten nodded in agreement, and soon the Chunin-level kunoichi turned to the captain and spoke to him quickly. "You will need to get away from here, but please send word to Konoha and to Tsunade Heim that we are going to find our own way. I know we are asking a lot in doing this, but please do so if you can." The captain looked on at the two Konoha ninja and knew that they were going to risk themselves to slow down the enemy ninja after them. Normally he would have just focused on his own duties and plans, but he knew that doing so without helping them was not going to be good for him. They were already risking their lives to do this even without pay, and they were going to fight to lure the enemy away from them. So the least that he could do for these young people was do as they had asked of him and his crew. "All right, but be careful." Tenten and Naruto nodded as they got off of the boat and soon headed towards their pursuers as the ship went on ahead of them. This was not going to be an easy fight, but they were not going to back down from doing what they could in order to defeat their pursuers. And also buy the innocent captain and his crew time to escape and hopefully send word to Konoha about what was going on. It was not long before the two Konoha ninja were deep in a fight between them and the rogue ninja, all of whom happened to be high-ranking Chunin and some Jonin. They were however not going to go down without a fight, as Tenten and Naruto were able to fight back well. Tenten had become a lot stronger and also expanded her fighting skills and Naruto's 2-year training, coupled with his training in nature manipulation recently. The battle had been pretty demanding and they were both exhausted by the end of the battle. They had managed to force away a large number of the ninja and soon sent them packing, but it had been a tough battle and they were both exhausted. Added to the fact that their ride from before had already gotten a fair amount of distance from them meant they could not go back. The ships used by the rogue ninja were also damaged severely in the fighting, and the ship that limped away carrying the survivors was not good enough to last. This forced the two of them to try and find instead an island for them to rest at and therefore avoid being caught out in the open by the elements. The trip using water walking jutsu was not an experience that was worth repeating, even more so since both of them were tired from the battle and had used up a fair portion of their chakra to get to sight range of any island. It was not long before the two finally spotted an island and soon made their way there. The whole trip on the ocean had been tiring and utterly relentless as the sun was out and they were both suffering badly. Naruto however managed to power himself a bit more to finally find a large area of the beach that was covered by a large number of tree branches from the coconuts there. He helped Tenten up as she was tired and headed for the shade as the day began to move on. The two were tired and needed to get some much-needed sleep. And as soon as they were under the cover of the shade, they both fell asleep. The Kyuubi was less than happy with what had just happened but decided not to bother with the whole situation as it decided to keep itself awake just in case something happened to his container in the middle of the entirely necessary but still annoying long sleep he was in. The next day, Naruto was able to wake up and at first he had no idea what was going on and where he was, that is until the memories came right back to him. He turned to see what Tenten's current situation was and he was relieved that she was sleeping well enough. The battle with the enemy ninja was taxing on them since they were fighting in a situation that had not gone well for them since their foes were high-ranking ones and carried a lot of explosive weapons. Thankfully they had managed to get away to safety while the ship they had been on was lost. It had not been easy doing the water walking bit on the ocean and even more so when the attack happened when a large storm cell had been in the area. Both of them were soaked though Tenten's massive scroll apparently had been specially protected from the storms itself and also from water damage, which was why it was still dry and intact. He decided not to worry about that for now and sought out what else they had to work with from the small boat that they had taken. Apparently there were some cups made from metal and also some fishing line. They had some soldier pills and while he was not looking forward to eating those, he knew full well that they had to make do with what they had. Unless they found some other form of food they were going to have to eat those pills. It was here that Tenten finally woke up and spoke to Naruto as soon as she wiped her eyes a bit to get rid of her sleepiness. "Naruto-san, are you alright?" Naruto turned and nodded towards Tenten, happy to see that she was now awake, that way they could work up a plan on how to survive here on this island. "Yeah. But we're going to have to get used to the fact we're the only ones on this island right about now, Tenten-san." Tenten nodded as she recalled that the rest of the trader ship /S crew had managed to get away from the ninja. It would have been seen as a crazy move to leave the two of them behind, but it was not to be unexpected. The men on the ship were not trained fighters by any stretch of the imagination, and they were a small merchant outfit and as such did not have the money to hire a full guard detail. "I understand. Good news is that we have our weapons and supplies so we can at least make the most out of the situation. We'll need to wait here and get some help, right Naruto-san?" "Yeah, and while I can summon my toad friends, they won't like it if they are near salt water. I have some less than friendly memories when I summoned Boss Toad in the ocean after all. I can only ask them to send messages to Konoha that we're fine." "Do we have a map by any chance?" Tenten shook her head at that. "Afraid not. The only maps I know of would have been with the captain and besides, we took a different route coming to where we were going on the mission. And we did only ask to be taken along for the ride after all." Naruto sighed at that as they then got up to see what they could find to eat for breakfast. They had supplies of tools left at the very least so they were all right to some extent. And once they were able to have some food in their stomachs to help them deal with hunger pangs, then they were going to need to settle in and send a message to Konoha via Naruto's toad summons. Later, as the two sat near the fire, they decided to drink from some of the metal cups they had with them and began to relax a bit as the cool water from the nearby lake was good on their tongues as both of them needed some serious moisture after all the work they had to do. Once they were done slacking their thirst, they decided to wait for their fish to be cooked as well as some of the crabs that Naruto had managed to catch. It was a while but the smell of food helped them relax as the two looked around the place with Naruto being the first to speak on their current situation now that they were going to be able to relax somewhat. "You know, all things considered, this place does not look all that bad." Tenten could not help but agree to some extent on what Naruto had said about the island. "Yeah, usually some guys would talk about being on an island by themselves, though usually with female company." Naruto laughed a bit at that and Tenten smiled slightly at the humor, They were going to need a good deal of humor to make it on this place that was going to be their respective home. As soon as they were sure that the food was ready, they dug into them. The first to go were the fish, and it took some time for them to do so since avoiding the bones was a must. The fish were at least 8 in number as Tenten managed to use her senbone to spear them while Naruto dove into the water for the crabs, which were at least 4 in number and fairly big in size. Once the fish were out of the way, the crabs were next, and they were all female crabs as well, and soon the taste of crab meat was very good. They were making sure not to make too much of a mess, but they were going to wash up anyway. It was not long before a pile of fish bones was soon joined by the shells of crabs, as the two ninja were very focused on getting every shred of meat they could get from their meals at this point in time. Once it was over, they enjoyed the food and soon got their extra cups that had water in them and began to drink the cool water. Naruto looked up to the sun and sighed a bit as he decided to speak out on how different it all looked that they now had been able to get food into their stomachs. It's load better to look at this place with a full stomach, right, Tenten-san? Tenten nodded in agreement at that as she looked at the same view as Naruto was currently looking at. She took a drink and then spoke to Naruto. It is shame that we got here like this, huh, Naruto-san? I guess anyway, I know that this is not the right time or anything, but I have. Tenten already guessed what was Naruto going to ask. She knew that despite him being dense, he was a lot more perceptive when he needed to be. She knew that it was something that she was going to have to talk about sooner or later. You noticed that me and Neji have been kind of distant with one another, right? Naruto gulped a bit and sighed as he nodded. Yeah, I really wish I did not utter it, but I was kind of curious and also a bit worried. Sure, you two still work together and hang out as friends and teammates with bushy brows, but you know you two don't look like a couple anymore, and that kind of is a real surprising thing to me since you guys were always a team. I know. I don't think anyone yet really knows it, but me and Neji broke up a few months ago. Naruto gave a sad look and replied, oh damn, sorry, I had no idea, can't figure out why you two broke up, thought Tenten-san. You and Neji look alright together. If you don't want to tell me about the reason, then I'll understand. Tenten nodded and decided that she might as well tell Naruto about what happened between her and Neji. There's a reason Neji and I broke up. Naruto-san's marrying his cousin. Naruto was drinking from one of the other cups they had been able to get water with when she mentioned that, and so it was not the least bit surprising that Naruto did a spectacular spit take. It was nowhere near the same as the time he had breathed fire when she had stuffed him with a super spiced curry rice back on that mission years ago. But it was still eye-catching. Naruto recovered and quickly turned to Tenten and spoke in a shocked fashion. Neji is marrying Hinata? Tenten shook her head and could not help but feel amused by that reaction to a degree as she decided to set Naruto straight. No, he's not marrying Hinata, you goofball. You did not let me finish. Neji is marrying a cousin who is related to the main family but on a different side. Her name is Kimiko and she happens to be a rather interesting member of the family, and since she is from a different side, she is not too close to relation with either Hinata or Neji. And it seems that Hiroshi-sama wants this to happen as a way to heal the divide between the main and branch families. Naruto recovered a bit and saw Tenten's slightly sad expression at the thought of that discovery and could not help but feel a bit of sympathy for the dark-haired weapon mistress. So that's why you and Neji broke up? Tenten nodded and replied, yeah, but we talked about it a great deal before we decided to break up. I understood the reasons behind the marriage and Neji was honest to me about it. He was not happy with breaking up with me and wished that things were different. He would have preferred to be with me and more. But it was a chance to repair the divide between the families and he was willing to take that chance if his uncle was as well. He told me that he was going to at least meet Kimiko and see what she was like before agreeing to the whole thing, and asked if I would meet her as well. And what happened? I met her, and she was, well, she was like Hinata, though less shy and timid as our respective comrade is. She can be bossy when she wants to be and she can fight as well, but she can be very friendly and kind as well. And she seemed not to be bothered by Neji at all when they first met, and even called him a handsome genius. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and Tenten nodded with a smile. Yes, she called him that, and even challenged him to a fight to see how good he was since there had been stories about his accomplishments in the Hyuga clan. Tenten sighed a bit as she looked at the fire as the memories came back. Once she got herself centered. Tenten, I don't know what to say. Tenten sighed a bit and replied, you don't have to say anything. It was nice to finally let it all out after some time. Besides, I have made some peace with it. Naruto. Neji looks happy with Kimiko and the same goes for her. She's really nice as well and they get along well. I am happy for them, but yet, it hurt a bit that we had to break up, but at least we remained good friends and teammates even after all that happened. That's better than most, I guess. Naruto placed his hand on Tenten's shoulder in a gesture of comfort and instead of rejecting it, Tenten looked at him and smiled a bit as she drank some more of the cool water. It was a revelation to him to know that Neji and Tenten were no longer a couple, and he now understood that while they were still on good terms when he saw them, They seemed to be a bit further apart from one another. He decided not to bother Tenten about what happened between her and Neji and focus only on what they needed to do in order to survive until they were rescued. As soon as their meals were over, Tenten decided to get some exercise to keep herself in shape while he was going to do the very same thing as she was. Once that would be over, they needed to find a place for them to rest in for the duration of their stay on the island and take stock of their supplies, equipment and what they could get from the island itself. The next few days reached into at least 2 months, and those same months were not the least bit easy for the two of them, but considering the fact that they were still able to have their gear was an advantage. Tenten still intact and dry weapon scrolls meant that they had plenty of tools and equipment to use on the island, and coupled with Naruto's cage bunshine, they were able to make the most of their situation. The weapons and tools allowed them to make a large hut which would be their shelter overlooking a high-rise of solid limestone over the middle of the island, and since the path was hard to climb by human standards, it would be somewhat harder for larger animals to try and climb upwards on, so it was where their chakra came in handy. The hut itself was at least 6 to 7 feet in height and at least 12 feet wide, and they were able to make it so with large planks of wood that were tied together with large amounts of metal wire which were chakra reinforced as well as being of a rust-resistant type of metal. The planks were soon covered afterwards with some tar that was found near a swampy area of the island, which they took in large containers that Tenten had stored away. Once that was done, they placed large palm branches to waterproof it a bit more as well as have holes on the 4 walls in the middle of the roof to allow for good ventilation of the place. There in the middle was a fire pit, not for cooking, but to keep the place warm. And there were small dishes of metal that they had found from the wreck of a nearby ship that ran aground on the other side of the island, which they used to burn some herbs that the Kyuubi told Naruto that if burned can create a sweet-smelling smoke that was actually intolerable to bugs and mosquitoes, for which the blonde was happy for. And so was Tenten, as they also got planks on the ground, smoothly cut by Naruto's use of his wind chakra and covered with soft earth, leaves, and the salvaged cloth sails from the same ship's still intact storage deck to make it more comfortable. The whole floor also served as the bed, as it were, so sleeping anywhere was considered a good idea. They also made sure to have a signal fire nearby which they would light if they were able to spot a ship on another slightly taller rise of limestone that they saw offered a full view of the island. Food and water was something that they were usually concerned with, as they had to go down into the island and the water to eat what they could. There was plenty of food though, as there were some wild animals in large numbers on this very large place. There were some wild rabbits, snakes of the poisonous and non-poisonous varieties, large wild boars, wild chicken and also some wild boars. These creatures were pretty much worth trying to catch and eat, though they were careful of the boars and the snakes of both kinds. The larger animals would be preserved by drying the meat if there was too much for them to eat. They also made sure to hunt for fish from the rivers and the ocean itself, and since there were also other types of seafood such as crabs, at least they had a good deal of variety. The fish would at times be eaten raw or brought back to be cooked, and it was at least a change of pace for the two of them. There were also vegetables and fruits on the island, which was a good thing in their case since it balanced things out. However, Naruto was not all too keen on eating vegetables, as he was not a fan of them. Tenten, however, was able to convince him to eat them, and he was naturally able to stomach it since Tenten was the kind of girl who insisted on a proper diet. And considering that she was a strong woman, she was not going to get too much of an argument from him. Their supplies of tools and weapons were very much lifesavers, and since both of them had been trained to survive in the wild, they were all right, though Tenten was better trained, having been a year older than Naruto when it came to being a ninja. Naruto himself was a lot better off since he had been able to train with Jiraiya on how to survive in the wild. They took the time to also train themselves, and in hindsight, that made their time a lot more interesting in the island, and the training could be useful if they were to go into battle again. The time between them also had some given rise to a few concerns for the two ninja in different ways, but all ways were leading to one problem. And that was their close proximity to one another, as they were the only people on the island. For Naruto, he had to admit that being with Tenten on a daily basis was a bit of a hassle and a test of his self-control, since she was an attractive woman. Sure, she was nice to look at when they were younger, though he did not hang out with her, Neji, and Lee all that much. But she was now a lot more attractive after he had last seen her, even more so when he had at times caught her taking off her clothing, loosening her hair, placing them in her chosen hairstyle, lounging around and the like, as he was looking at her a lot more than normal. But he made sure to not make it seem like he was looking at her. After all, she was by far the most accurate thrower of weapons he had met, and he was not in the mood to annoy Tenten to the point she might decide to that their training sessions a bit too far. Still, he was a guy, and naturally he was attracted to a woman, and he had to be honest that he had dreamed a perverted scene once where she and a number of kunoichi were in towels only. That list naturally included Sakura, Tamari, Mitsuri, which was wrong since the girl was by all rights Gaara's girlfriend/fangirl, Ino, Kurenai, Anko, Tsunade, Shizune, and even Moegi and Ayame. That was something that had been a real problem since he was hoping not to allow his perverted side to influence him. It hardly helped matters that the demon fox was egging him on. The fact that he was on better terms with Tenten was no promise that he was going to be attractive to Tenten herself as well. After all, even if she and Neji were no longer a couple now, he could not very well move in on Tenten since she might not like the idea and she might still not be happy for losing Neji to another girl. Even if she had told him that she was okay with the whole affair, Naruto was not a complete idiot when it came to something like heartache. He only had to look at Sakura to know how bad it can be to a woman when her loved one flew the proverbial coop. That did not mean that he was not able to avoid seeing Tenten in a less than platonic fashion, namely when he at times accidentally saw her bathing nearby in the waters, both freshwater and in the ocean, changing her clothes and drying them after cleaning, and more. It was hard on his nerves and he hoped that sooner or later, he would be able to put an end to it. He had respect for Tenten and her feelings since while she remained tough, he was not going to let it blind him to the fact that she might be hurting still. Plus there was the fact that he was a Jinchuriki. He did not know if Tenten was aware of his being a Jinchuriki, but he was not going to risk it. If she found out that he was beginning to have less than pure thoughts about her, coupled with his status right now, she would have freaked and tried to do something about it. He was on better terms with Tenten and was not in the mood to let his hormones and his secret ruin it. Especially to the point that Tenten might be hostile to him all throughout their time here until they were rescued, even though he had a feeling that she might know about it in her own way. Naruto was not the only one dealing with their current predicament either. Tenten herself was also wondering on just how she could act around Naruto at times while they were on the island. After all, she was still a young woman despite her desire to be a powerful kunoichi as Tsunade was in her youth, so being around good-looking guys was something she enjoyed. When she was younger, she did find Sasuke nice to look at, along with Neji, who she had a close friendship with despite the guy's standoffish manners every now and then. Naruto was nice looking, though he was a real goofball and kind of short, plus being a bit of a blockhead on occasion. But now he had certainly grown up a lot and was a lot better looking and certainly buffed up as well as being taller. Plus her time in being around the hyperactive yet compassionate and kind brave blonde shinobi had told her that while he was not the best in the brains department on some things, in others, he was very capable. The fact that he happened to be the only one who had mastered the use of the Rasengan in a week, a feat that many considered impossible, was one thing. The fact that he also managed to learn how to use wind chakra was another, considering the fact that it was quite rare in Konoha. There had been times that she did catch him looking at her, and while he tried to act like he was not, she knew. But she was not angry. After all, she was aware that it would happen, though the fact that he looked at her like that was kind of surprising, since he used to have eyes only for Sakura. There was also the fact that it was nice to know that she could turn heads when she wanted to or not. She might want to be a great ninja in her own right, but she was also a woman who wanted to see if she could make a man turn and take notice. And the way Naruto turned quickly, avoid looking as if he was peeking at her without her permission, he was certainly acting like a virgin trying not to be caught. And in truth she did the same thing at times, looking at him and studying him a good deal, and also seeing that he was certainly a good-looking guy, all the right muscles in the right places. And she had no doubt that he had really gotten a lot better than when they were kids. She knew that one of the reasons Naruto did not do anything was that he knew what she could do and had also respect for her, being the second reason. The other no doubt had to do with his resident, the Kyuubi. Tenten managed to figure out that Naruto was the one who contained the Kyuubi, even if she was a year older than Naruto. She was an intelligent girl in her own right, and when she had seen the chakra come out from Naruto when he and Neji had fought before, she knew that something was up. She kept that image in her mind and then recalled the time that they all found Gaara when Akatsuki managed to go after him and he was dead. She recalled the emotional confrontation between the old lady Chiyo and Naruto and how he accused the elderly Tsunakunoichi of being nothing more than a hypocrite and monster for what she had done to Gaara. And also how that people like those who label them as monsters were all hypocrites and the real monsters to think that they were better than him and Gaara, for they had no idea how they suffered as Jinchuriki. She had not gotten all the details, but she dug into her research and soon figured out what was the meaning of the term and then recalled it all. That was how she figured out that Naruto was the one who held the Kyuubi at bay in himself. That was something that she had to admit had surprised and made her worry to some degree. But her time with Naruto made her see that he was as human as anyone. He can laugh, he can cry, he can lose his temper, he can be smart at times, he can be such a dolt, he can be sincere, he can be touching, and he can be such a nice man. It was easy enough to guess that the life he led was anything but nice, since she had learned enough about him when she read his file. And it was nice to know that he had worked hard to make it this far on his own power and grew stronger for every moment he spent while with her and everyone else back home. That was why she decided to talk to him about their current situation when she was able to do so, and also see if he was willing to be honest to her about what he had been doing these past few days when she was not looking. In their home on the island, the two of them were now getting ready for their meal, and as the food cooked, They took the time to look around their current home. It was not much to be sure, but it had been like home to them. Their current food was some caught fish and some killed snakes that had been gutted and skinned, just as the fish were also gutted and had their scales taken off with the kunai that they had. The food was also joined by water that they were also boiling in cups and adding some herbs to make tea. Naruto did not mind good tea, and at least there were some herbs that added to the overall taste. As they finally got down to eating, Tenten began to wonder on what was going to be her plan on how to get Naruto's attention. But she decided not to wait for too long and just go ahead and see how the direct approach worked. Naruto-kun, I need to ask you something. What is it, Tenten-san? What happened to you back in the fight with Neji in the Chunin exams? I know Neji managed to block your chakra points, but suddenly you were able. Naruto was a bit confused by that since he had not thought back about that fight with Neji for a while. He then recalled that it was the only time that he had used the Kyuubi's chakra in public, and he quickly realized how foolish he had been to let it go out the JMUHCH. At the time when he was younger, he did not mind using it, but now he was very cautious when it came to using the chakra of the Kyuubi. And there was a part of him that suspected that anyone who was in the know would have figured out that what they saw was the Kyuubi's chakra. He tried to find out a solution to his situation but could tell that lying was not going to help him at all. Tenten was too sharp a person to fool when something important enough to get her attention was in front of her. And there was the fact that she was with them in that mission in rescuing Gaara, so she might have figured something out. 2 was using another form of chakra in the fight. A form of chakra that I had been using for a while before I went on that training trip with the pervy sage to get stronger 2 years ago after that last mission we had alongside Gaara and his siblings. Though I swore not to for very good reasons, Tenten-san. It's very personal for me, so I hope you can understand about why it's not something I want to talk about. Naruto-san, I think I know what it was about. When we were in that mission before, I saw you angry at Chiyo-san, and I heard about that term Jinchuriki as well. I know that this is painful for you, but I know what your burden is. And I guess I am trying to say that I am glad. Naruto felt something strike his mind at that, and he looked seriously at Tenten as he tried to make sense of what she had just said. What do you mean you are glad? I am glad that you did not become what people called you to be. I might not have hanged out a lot with you, and I was a year ahead, but I too heard the rumors, even saw you when you were still young, being bullied and called names at the same time. But you never seemed to be dampened down by your burden. You seem to be strong and growing more by the day. Even though I can bet that you had difficulties too. Naruto looked at Tenten as she continued. You know, when you beat Neji back in the exams, I saw that you did something for him. You changed him since he and Rock Lee were always fighting one another, and you already know about his own past. But no, after that battle, I saw how he changed and they got along better. He even began to have better relations with Hinata-san and the rest of the family as well. All because of you. And I also saw the way Chiyo willingly gave her life to save Gaara and how she called you a shining light for the future, you and Gaara. And of course, I can see the friendship between you and Gaara. When I met him again, I could not believe the guy who nearly killed Lee and was very much a sadist could become such a beloved Kazekage. And I can sense that Tamari-san and Kankuro-san also hold you in high regard. That's why I am glad that you are still you, and you have not changed at all. You are a good person, Naruto-san, and I am happy for that. Naruto did not know what to say to such praise. He had expected the worst from Tenten now that she figured out his secret, but instead, he got this. And it felt great. There was relief and happiness since Tenten was very straightforward in her answer to him, and he had long since developed the ability to know when one was lying to him. And Tenten was not lying to him at all. Thanks, Tenten-san. I was really worried there for a second when you found it out. But you know that you might have to keep what you know as a secret. There is still a law about the whole thing after all. Tenten smiled at that and replied, no worries, your secret's all right with me. Anyway, now that we've gotten that part out of the way, there is something else that I need to talk about. What would that be? About you having spent some time looking at me when I was not looking, and in a less than pure fashion too. Naruto paled a bit at that and did not know what to say at first, but seeing that denying it was not going to be a good idea, he decided to speak. Sorry about that, Tenten-san. I did not mean for that to happen. Tenten gave him a teasing smile and replied, don't worry about it, Naruto-san. Truth be told, it's to be expected from you guys after all. It would have been weird if you did not look at women at all. Unless. Naruto was quick on the meaning behind that and shook his head and replied in a panicking tone, complete with the waving hands. No. I swear I am not a fruit. I am a straight man and I like women a lot. Tenten was amused by the way he was acting right now, and she made that rather obvious as she began to laugh a bit at him. Though she made sure to laugh in a good-natured fashion to show that she was not trying to make him feel bad at what he was doing. Once she felt her humor subside, she spoke once more. Don't need to worry about it, Naruto-kun. I can already guess that you are a straight guy. After all, you've proven that more than once. And I am not the least bit offended at all. We both happen to be ninja and by all rights when we leave the academy, we all are pretty much adults. So that is not something that I am going to take offense to." Naruto felt a level of relief at that. But he was going to be in for a very interesting surprise as Tenten spoke once more. "But I do intend to say that I did the same thing to you as well. Looking at you when you were not expecting it, and now I think that since that has come out already, I intend to do something about it." Naruto did not know what that meant, but quickly got the message as Tenten moved right towards him with a smile on her face. In Konoha, Tsunade was pleased to hear that they were now getting closer to the last island in the map as Jiraiya, Kakashi, Guy, Yamato, Neji, and Sakura sent Gamakachi to her in the tower no less than an hour ago. The moment they had heard of the news from the captain who personally came to inform them all in the Hokage Tower of Naruto and Tenten's disappearance, they moved out to find them. The captain had managed to provide them a map to their travel route at the time and pointed out that there were a number of islands there that had been used in the past by other ships but were no longer in use. Those very same islands were the very same ones that the group was looking into now, one by one, and naturally Jiraiya had been the one to help them. Gamakachi had done all he could to provide them with the location but it had been hit and miss thus far. However, the last island was on the map and if that was the case, then that was where those two were going to be found. The blonde Hokage only hoped that neither Naruto nor Tenten had gotten into trouble with one another while they were there on the island. She hoped that they were able to come to a mutual understanding by the time rescue arrived. She had no idea that at the very moment she had that frame of mind, the young man and young woman in question has more than a mutual understanding between them happening right now. Lemon time. Tenten moved closer to Naruto as she gently kissed the still utterly surprised blonde Janan who was her only companion on this island, friend and now her lover as she ran her hands on his hair, marveling at the feel of it in her hands. As she was still kissing the blonde, she couldn't help but feel her body become a lot hotter by the second. This was something that she had hoped for in a while as she began to slowly deepen the kiss between her and Naruto. Naruto himself was still trying to get used to the fact that one of his fellow Konoha 11 comrades was now kissing him like there was no tomorrow. Of all the things he had expected to happen while he was here on this island with Tenten ever since the mission had gone south, this was not one of them. But he was not the kind of person to refuse either way as he began to get into the kiss with Tenten as his moral side began to give way to his more basic instincts. And soon their kiss was becoming a lot more heated and passionate as time passed the two of them. They were soon using their tongues making them moan even more with their kisses on one another. As soon as they finally parted to get some air into their lungs, Tenten decided to remove her lover's clothing. Sure, she had seen Naruto naked though only the upper portion of him, but now she was going to see the rest of him. And Naruto was smart enough not to resist Tenten at all as she was doing this to him. Thus it was not long before his upper torso was now fully exposed for Tenten to see. The weapon mistress of Konoha could not help but admire the look of Naruto's body just like that and she looked down to see the seal on his stomach, but instead of being scared of it, she gently touched it, and looking at Naruto with understanding. She knew that it took courage for him to admit his long-held secret of being the Jinchuriki. But she told him that it was all right though she was pleased that he was willing to tell her. She had seen the Kyuubi's chakra long ago when they were still young and while she did not make sense of it then, she did now. As she touched it gently she then took hold of his pants, removed it with some help from him. His body was very well toned and there was not an inch of fat anywhere on his body. Her eyes roamed his face and took in all the details that she could. His hair which had a slight glow in the light looked like gold to her. His face was now well defined and had none of the baby fat that was left there and looked like that of a well-trained man. His eyes were deep blue and glowing like sapphires in the firelight and held her close. The whisker marks on his face gave him the Lupin and feral look once more though that was balanced by her experience with his gentle and funny side. Her eyes went once more to the blonde's body and she could not help but relish the sight of Naruto fully naked like this before her. His arms were still toned and strong and her eyes, his chest was not wide but certainly good to look at. Then his eyes went to his toned stomach once more and relished the sight of his abs before looking once more at the seal there on his stomach. That look did not last long however as she was now looking at his penis. And what she saw made her blush a bit both in her face and in her mind, as well as making her lick her lips. Naruto's cock was already 4 inches in length and it was not yet fully aroused and it also happened to be at least 2/3 of an inch in width. And Tenten was already familiar with how some women would rate men. Namely when it came to their length and width and from what she had seen thus far on Naruto. He was already getting some very good points in, and the thought so of what he was going to be like when he was fully aroused was more than enough to make Tenten all the more eager to see Naruto in full arousal. She wondered briefly if Hinata had any idea just how her Naruto-kun looked naked, and she could help but imagine how Hinata would have blushed and fainted at the sight before her. And she could not help but wonder why was it that Sakura had not realized just how lucky she was to be with Naruto. Sure, Sasuke was good looking, But Naruto was like a truly beautiful and flawless diamond in the rough. Couple that with the sight of his toned thighs and legs, which told her that he had not just upper body strength and stamina for any activity, but also good lower body strength and stamina. Naruto was more than able to be quite the lover in bed. That was more than enough to make Tenten very happy that she was the only one to see him like this, and while it was selfish in a sense, she was not going to complain. "Sorry Sakura-chan," Hinata-chan, "but from this moment on, Naruto-kun is all mine." That train of thought was more than enough to convince Tenten to finally say to Naruto what she thought of him naked like this. And she felt that now was as good a time as any, as Naruto was blushing at the fact that she was looking at him so intently. "You look very handsome and delicious, Naruto-kun." The truthful, and yet hungry and lustful way that Tenten said it was more than enough to make Naruto blush even more as he replied, "Thanks Tenten-chan." Tenten gently smiled as she decided that she could indulge on those things at a later date. For now, it was high time that she was to be fair with her blonde lover and let him see her too. After all, she was already looking at him shamelessly while he was naked. Why should she hide from him her own form? Naruto did not help but look on in awe as Tenten began to strip her clothing off, and she did in a slowly and sensual fashion. The forehead protector was the first to go. She then released her hair and soon opened up her outer clothing, which was soon followed by her pants and sandals. The outer garments were soon placed aside, and soon Tenten removed her mesh underclothing, with the lower short pants mesh being the first and then the upper top style one. And that only left Tenten in her bra and panties, which were in the color of red, and soon those were soon joining the pile. And now Naruto could only stare as Tenten was now fully naked before him, and he was getting quite the eyeful. One thing was certain in the blonde's mind at this point: he was going to enjoy this night. In Naruto's mind, "Oh yeah, this is nice. For a youngster, this Tenten knows how to keep in shape." The Kyuubi was enjoying the sight of the now naked Kunoichi before his container, and he was now very curious to see just how his container was going to react. In the real world, Naruto could not help but give a moan of approval and arousal as he looked at Tenten, who also decided to let her hair loose. Her brown hair had grown longer somewhat, but was not long enough to reach her shoulders. Still, the brunette Kunoichi was very attractive in her own way, as she was now fully naked in front of him and her Konoha forehead protector there on the other side of their home. The blonde looked at Tenten's face and noted that she was certainly attractive. And her hair was nice, even though it was nicer in his mind when she had her hair in her normal style from before. Her eyes glowed with mischief and attraction, which added to the whole image of her being like this as he moved his gaze lower. Her body was certainly well toned and hardened due to her long time training, and not just her weapon skills, but her Kunoichi skills as well. There was no doubt that her slender and firm female muscles were filled with power, and while there were some very faint scars there on her form, results of her missions, they did little in his eyes to lessen her beauty. Her breasts were well formed and suited for Tenten's height and build. She was not as gifted in the size department as some of the other women he had seen, but Tenten's breasts were well formed and sized either way, and her deep red nipples were also very attractive to the eye. Both her breasts were more than able to move in time with her breathing, and Naruto was quick to see that his eyes were glued right on them as they moved up and down slowly with each breath that Tenten took every moment or so. He looked down to her toned stomach, her well-formed womanly hips and thighs, and her calves, which were strong despite the slender way they looked. He was surprised to notice that there was no patch of hair between her thighs, and he wondered why, until he recalled from the pervy sage at one time in their travels that some women actually shaved there for one reason or another. Jiraiya even said that the sight of a mature and sexy woman without the hair there actually could turn men on even more. He thought what the man said was another result of his perverted mind and imagination, but now it seemed that Jiraiya was right on the money on this one, as he could not help but notice that he himself was getting turned on as well by that. And there was the desire to actually touch that spot between Tenten's legs to see if it was as smooth as it looked. Once he was done looking at her from head to toe and back again, Naruto could not help but wonder just why was it that no one else decided to make a move on Tenten after she and Neji had to break up. He already had a fairly good idea as to why, but decided not to comment on anything about that. That was not his focus right now, as he knew that Tenten had moved on somewhat and now he was going to help her move on in his very own way. He then commented to Tenten about how she looked to him, and he knew that he meant every word of it as well. "Tenten-chan, you're beautiful." Tenten blushed a bit at that, but she also smirked out and even did a sexy pose for the blonde Jinan who was before her. "Of course I am, and that's because I take care of myself very much. I would not be Konoha's weapon mistress otherwise." Naruto smiled at that, and Tenten decided to move to him and gently sat next to Naruto, allowing him to take a very good look at her now fully naked form. She in turn got a very good look at him, and she could not help herself as she began to run her hands on his naked form, reaching to the place on his body where the seal was. The blonde Jinan was not sure how he was going to talk to Tenten about that, but she then spoke to him about that. "I already know about the Kyuubi, you know, he figured it out when you fought Neji in the Chunin exams all those years ago, though it took a while since we were younger then. You are no monster, you know if you were, you would have never done so much for Konoha anyway. Naruto nodded a bit and replied gently, thanks. Tenten smiled and decided to make her move as she took his hand, and before he could say anything or ask her anything, she placed his hand right between her legs. Naruto gasped as he got the chance to feel Tenten's skin between her legs as well as feel the lips of her vagina, which right now was starting to get wet. Tenten noted the look on his face and replied, I did this by accident years ago. I liked it and decided to keep it that way for a long time. You like it, Naruto-kun? Why yeah, it feels different and in a very good way. Tenten laughed gently at that and whispered right into Naruto's ear. So what are you waiting for? Touch me. Naruto needed no further cajoling from anyone as he moved his other hand to Tenten's breasts and began to play with them as well as her nipples, making Tenten moan out deeply at his actions as she too decided to get into the AC as she kissed him back while also running her hands on his own body while gently touching his cock at the same time. The blonde then moved his hand, which was between Tenten's thighs, touching her sex, and that seemed to send a signal through Tenten as the kunoichi parted her legs, allowing Naruto to also touch her inner thighs as well. They continued to touch and caress one another as well as kissing until they broke the kiss. Tenten was eager to finally get things going on a pace she wanted, and she was not going to be stopped, though she made sure to do it so that Naruto could catch up. She got things underway as she moved over Naruto's legs, and she was now between her lover's legs and soon began to place her hands on her lover's cock. She started slowly by moving her hands up and down. This went on until she moved her hands away and spat into them. Naruto was surprised by that but did not complain the very second she placed her now sleek and wet hands back on his cock. Tenten smiled at him for a moment before resuming her actions on his cock, but making sure to use her fine-toned hand coordination skills to move her hands up and down her lover's cock to make sure that she was doing it right. She had heard of this method before, and while it did not sound very nice, it was said that some men liked it and it was a good way to get things rolling to more interesting things. And it seemed that Naruto was one of those men who liked what she was now doing to him, giving her all the more reason to carry on with what she had in mind for him. Naruto had good reason to moan out deeply as Tenten began to run her hands up and down his cock as well as her using her hands to also massage his testicles. She started slowly at first, then built up speed, and just when he felt that he was about to go loose, she stopped, managing to somehow stop him from coming. On she was sure that he was not going to orgasm, she then repeated the very same process again and again. Tenten could not help but feel her lover's cock twitch with her actions, and while she was deeply tempted to let Naruto come, she did not allow it. She wanted to take it further before finally letting her lover release his cum for the first stage of the night between the two of them. Where was the fun of having passionate sex with a man who you care about and yes, loved, if the whole thing ended too early? With that in her mind, Tenten moved her hands away and soon decided to use her breasts to tease Naruto's cock. She started slowly and pressed her breasts together, just to get things going. Her blonde lover moaned out deeply at that, and she could not help but smile at the reaction as Naruto then spoke her name out rather loudly. Tenten-chan. Tukami. She liked that and began to move her breasts up and down on Naruto, and she felt his cock moving in and out between her breasts. That was more than enough to make his cock grow harder and hotter, and she could feel it. Those feelings naturally also made her even more aroused by the second as she also decided to kiss and lick the tip of Naruto's well-formed cock every time it was close enough for her. She would move slowly, then speed it up, stop completely to let Naruto slow down and recover, and then start the very same thing once more. It was pleasurable torture for her lover, that much she had no trouble of seeing. This went on for a while longer until she was able to taste his pre-cum. She loved the taste of the cum and was more than eager for the chance to finally taste what Naruto's cum tasted like. Naruto could not help himself as he saw the way that Tenten was licking his cock while continuing to use her breasts on his sex. The feel of the soft, warm, and smooth breasts around his cock was great, and feeling them when his balls hit them was also welcome. He was soon treated to another side as Tenten began to suck the tip of his cock in her mouth, as well as running her tongue on the tip and sucking on it at the very same time. Tenten-chan. Tenten enjoyed the way that Naruto was moaning out deeply, and she decided to take things down to the ultimate level as she opened her mouth and took in Naruto's cock slowly. It was a bit hard to do since he was big and long, but it was very much worth every second in her mind. She carried on until she was finally able to take in his cock all the way to the base, and it was a feeling that she enjoyed as she hummed a bit to herself to send many delicious vibrations in her mouth. She smiled mentally as she felt Naruto's cock shiver in her mouth as she continued to use her tongue on the blonde and soon began to make the move she wanted. She started slowly to make sure that she was going to do it all right, moving slowly back up while using her tongue at the very same time along with her mouth's inner walls. She continued with her actions until her lover's cock was almost out of her mouth. She moved away slowly and kicked the tip of Naruto's cock, making him moan, and she then moved to take it back into her mouth. She continued this action slowly and gently while using her hands at the very same time to make sure that she was giving her lover every chance to feel those delicious sensations over and over again in every part of him. Naruto enjoyed it as he moved to play with her head, thankfully not forcing her but just holding her there and playing with her hair. Naruto could not help enjoy the pleasure that flowed through every nerve in his body at those exact moments when Tenten would move away from his sex and then take it all the way back into her mouth. The sight of her doing that also served to add more fuel to his senses as Tenten soon began to pick up the pace of her actions. And he was more than willing to voice out his enjoyment of her actions on Tenten-chan. Yes, Kami 5. The two lovers were enjoying themselves a great deal, and it was going to be a long night as Tenten continued to move slowly, lavishing oral attention on her lover's cock. Once in a while, she would move away and then begin to lavish licks and kisses on the top, bottom, and sides of his cock to add more fuel to their passion. She would also direct attention to his testicles, doing this slowly and carefully to really give Naruto all that she could give him. And he enjoyed it as he then moved his hands from her head, and despite the position he was in, he moved his hands to play with her breasts and nipples at the same time as she continued to move her mouth on his cock. Both of them were virgins in every sense of the word, and it was not going to be long for them to finally reach their orgasm. And they soon hit it as Naruto leaned back and roared out his release. That was the only warning that Tenten was going to get from Naruto as he finally cried out his release. She felt the first hot and thick streams of his cum flow into her mouth and on her tongue, allowing her to taste his seed. It was clean and fresh, a slight salty taste but balanced with some measure of sweetness. She liked it as well as the feeling of heat from it and took in as Naruto released more of his seed. In Naruto's case, it felt like he was going to burn alive at this very second as he felt his cock shiver and unleash more of his cum. He was awed and aroused by the fact that Tenten was still there, taking in all of his cum without any complaint, and the blush on her face made him guess that she liked his taste. As soon as she was able to take in as much as she could, Tenten moved away from her lover's cock, and she got hit by some of his cum as soon as she released his cock from her mouth. The liquid seed hit her chin, then her throat, and then her breasts as well as her nipples at the same time. The kunoichi moaned out deeply at the feeling of the hot liquid on her skin and looked at Naruto and decided to give him a show. She did the show by first cleaning her chin and throat with her hands of his milk. She licked her hands clean, then moved her breasts to her mouth and began to lick and suck off the cum as well. Her breasts were not that big, but she had no problem with moving them close enough for her to clean them and her nipples with her own tongue. All the while, she did this right in front of the blonde Shinonwood could not help but audibly gulp at the sight before him. As soon as she was done cleaning herself of her lover's cum, she moved away and looked warmly at him as she soon getting ready to let Naruto do the same things to her as she had done to him in order to be fair to one another. Tenten leaned back and soon parted her legs to allow Naruto to see her fully exposed and obviously wet sex for him to see. The sight of Tenten like that, her naked form covered in a thin sheen of sweat, her breasts moving up and down with each breath that she took in, her skin flushed with pleasure, her face framed by her loose hair along with sporting a deep blush. That was more than enough to convince the blonde shinobi to make his move as he moved over Tenten and began to lavish kisses on her face and lips, not mindful for the faint taste of himself on her lips. He moved his oral ministrations to her neck, her collarbones, then to her chest, much to her approval for his actions. She moved her hands to his head and guided him to her breasts, showing just what was it that she wanted him to do to her right now, and he was more than willing to do what she wanted from him. Naruto moved his mouth over Tenten's right breast and nipple. He first moved to kiss her breast on the top, moving slowly towards her peak, licking along the way. He made sure to use his hands slowly and gently on her body as well as her left breast and nipple to make sure that he was able to pleasure that part of Tenten before using his oral ministrations on it. Tenten enjoyed the pleasure that was now running through her body at this very moment, and she was going to make sure that she was going to remember each moment they had together very close to her heart. But for now, it was Naruto's turn to drive her up the wall, and there was no doubt in her mind that he was going to do just that to her. And her thoughts on matter were very much dead center as the blonde began to lick, suck, nip, and kiss her breasts and nipples, moving from her left breast to her right breast, thus making sure that he was able to give a balanced amount of pleasure to both of her breasts and nipples at the same time, which served to make this moment all the more wonderful for her. She got a surprise as well when Naruto then moved his free hand to her stomach, running his fingers slowly up and down her flat and well-toned belly. The sensations were very nice to her senses and she enjoyed the thrill of the whole affair as Naruto soon began to rub her navel. And she then felt his hands touch the place between her thighs, and that was more than enough to make her part her legs quickly once more, and she was eager to see just what she was going to do this time to her pussy as well as her clit. The blonde shinobi was more than quick to see that and take advantage of the whole situation as he moved his fingers to Tenten's clit, enjoying the feel of it once more on his hand and fingers. The second he touched that part of the weapon mistress sex, She gave out a cry of pleasure and he enjoyed that. Further proof of Tenten's arousal was there as she began to release more of her juices at that very instant. Naruto was soon moving away from Tenten's firm and well-formed breasts and he began to kiss his way down to her sex. Tenten enjoyed this action of her lover while he also used his free hand on her body as well as her hips. Naruto then moved between Tenten's sex while he moved his hand that was coated with her juices, and the blonde saw that the weapon mistress of Konoha could not help but blush bright red as he decided to show her his hand, which was the one massaging her clit. He then licked her juices off his fingers and she could tell that he enjoyed the taste of her juices. It was one of the most erotic things she had seen before her in her life. And the same could be said for Naruto as he found the taste of Tenten's juices to be very nice to him and he was more than ready to do what he could to drive Tenten to the orgasm that she wanted. He started to do just that as he began to lick her clit slowly, making her shake hard as she reflexively moved her body to that. That told Naruto that he was on the right path to giving Tenten the release she wanted as he began to play with Tenten's clit slowly and surely while also running his fingers up and down on her pussy which was getting wetter as well. Tenten hummed out sounds of pleasure as he also moved to kiss her pussy lips. He tasted her juices when he licked his lips and he decided not to deny himself nor delay the moment as he decided to shock Tenten a bit more as he licked her pussy up and down a bit more. Tenten naturally enjoyed the pleasure as she gave a long and contented sigh, but that was changed into a loud cry in a moment. And that was for a good reason as Naruto did a combined assault on her pussy with both his tongue and his fingers. He used his tongue to thrust deeply into her pussy along with two of his fingers. He licked Tenten's inner walls while his fingers moved slowly in and out of her sex. That was more than enough to make Tenten gasp out, and as he continued with his dual assault on her sex, the brunette Kunoichi was more than willing to voice out her pleasure. Yes, Murray. The two lovers were more than happy with one another as Tenten felt her body react to her lover's very ample actions as her sex was getting hotter and wetter. And Naruto himself could already feel his cock become hotter and harder by the second, and he could taste and smell Tenten's ever-increasing arousal. The juices were sweet and also warm to his taste buds. He also enjoyed the feel of her hot, wet, soft, and tight walls, and the thought of how it would feel around his cock was more than enough to invigorate his desire. Naruto managed to control himself as he focused on making Tenten reach her orgasm before they got to that moment. He moved his tongue deeply in and out of her sex while moving his fingers back and forth while curving them a bit to hit Tenten's sensitive spots. And when he did so, he was able to see the results as Tenten released more of her juices and her inner walls were moving around his tongue and fingers in an erotic fashion. It was not going to be long before Tenten was going to reach her limit. She had played with herself in private before, so she was used to the feeling of orgasm. But this was her first time with a partner, so it was expected that she would be very eager to reach her limit and be pleasured by her blonde lover. As for Naruto, he was now hoping that he was going to give his brown-haired lover the orgasm that he knew that she deserved for what she had done for him only a few minutes ago. And the sight of Tenten in the grip or orgasm was something that he was more than eager and willing to see. And he did not have to wait for very long as Tenten finally cried out in pure joy as her orgasm hit her at that moment. Tenten felt her entire body sing out in pleasure as her orgasm hit. She felt waves of warmth and pleasure flow through her flesh and nerves. She could also feel the warmth flow into her bones, and she felt as if her entire self was floating on the surface of a sea of pleasure. She also felt her vagina release more of her juices and she relished it all, along with the fact that Naruto was still lapping up her juices, and the feel of her lover's actions on her sex was more than enough to arouse her even more. As for Naruto himself, he could not help but take in more of Tenten's juices and he enjoyed it. Her scream of release was the only warning that he had gotten, so he was caught off guard a bit by this. But he recovered well enough and took in most of her sweet, thick, and hot juices, and he enjoyed the way that she trembled and squirmed as she was in the throes of her orgasm, and he was pleased by that as he finished licking her pussy clean of her wetness and gave her clit a parting kiss before looking at Tenten. He loved what he saw as she was panting from the orgasm she just had. She turned to look at him and smiled towards him. He smiled right back and then moved on top of Tenten and then kissed her deeply. And she did not mind it at all. She in fact did not mind tasting her own juices on Naruto's mouth, as it served only to increase her pleasure and also make her more than eager for what was to come between them. As soon as they parted from one another, Naruto moved towards her breasts, kissing, licking and sucking them first before moving in between her legs once more for what was to come between the two of them. Tenten was more than aware of what Naruto intended to do at this point, and she was more than willing to let him do just that. She wanted it herself, so why would she try to delay it or say no to it as well? She nodded to Naruto and he was more than ready for it, while pleased for her silent but intense consent for this. He started by rubbing the tip of his cock on her pussy lips, allowing her still present wetness to coat his cock. He enjoyed it as he positioned himself in the right angle, and as soon as he did so, he began to move forward with his hips, and the two of them were more than willing to react to their actions. Tenten moaned out her lover's name deeply. Naruto-kun. Naruto himself was more than willing to moan out his lover's name as his cock was now parting her slits outer folds. Tenten-chan. The two continued to enjoy the pleasure they got from one another. Tenten gasped as Naruto's cock now was past her outer folds and now moving into her pussy. Naruto himself moaned as he could now feel the wetness there as well as her tight, hot and soft inner sheath around the tip of his cock, and that served to increase his desire for more. He looked at Tenten and saw the looks of pleasure written all over her face, and it served to increase his desire to really make Tenten scream his name and her pleasure. And that was enough to make him continue at this pace to make sure that he was going to give her all the pleasure she could handle, and he wanted to enjoy every moment he spent in pushing his cock deeper and deeper into her sex. It was not long before he finally buried himself deeply into her sex, and there he was able to drive his dick into her pussy all the way to the hilt. And the results of that were obvious as the brown-haired woman made her happiness known to him. Ooh! Tenten was more than willing to shout out her pleasure, and she was not alone either, as Naruto himself also moaned out at the very same time. The brunette weapon mistress could not help but enjoy the feeling of being filled to the brim by her lover's sex, and she could tell from Naruto's expressions that he was enjoying it as much as she was. Naruto himself enjoyed the pleasure that was running up and down his body and his nerves as he was now buried deeply into Tenten's hot and wet pussy. The tightness there was only part of the pleasure he was feeling, as the softness, wetness, and warmth made him all the more happy as he was now staying there to savor the pleasure that was running through his body. Tenten looked at her lover and she could see the blush on Naruto's handsome face as she moved forward to lick his lips passionately. That was more than enough to wake up Naruto as he moved to kiss her back, and they were soon kissing each other very intensely. Tenten enjoyed the pleasure as she then looped her legs around Naruto's waist and she moved her legs too on him, sending a message for him to finally get moving. Naruto broke the kiss and looked at her, and she felt him pull back, making her groan as the pleasure flowed through her body as she felt her lover's cock move back out of her sex. She enjoyed it very much and was eager for Naruto to finally drive his cock deeply into her sex once more, and she was not going to be disappointed. Naruto moved back further until only the head of his cock was there and nearly out of Tenten's sex, only for him to drive his cock deeply into her again with one full thrust of his hips, making Tenten cry out her lover's name. Naruto-kun. That served to light up Naruto's passion and his eager lust as he repeated the action again, going slowly, savoring the way Tenten reacted to his actions until he drove himself deeply into her sex once more. He made sure to do it slowly and surely to make sure that he was going to give Tenten the pleasure she deserved, and Tenten's moans were more than enough proof that he was doing a very good job for her. Oh! Ah! The movements of Naruto's cock in and out of her sex made Tenten more than happy as she continued to hold on very tight to the blonde shinobi as the pleasure grew. His slow motions were exquisite torture to the brunette, but she was more than willing to bear with the pleasure and torture as she knew that they were going to soon reach the point of release. And she had no doubt in her mind that it was going to be very glorious. Yes. Moire. Ah. That spurred Naruto on as he began to speed up his thrusts in and out of Tenten's hot and wet sex, and he also made sure to lean back and watch Tenten as her body moved in time with each time he buried his cock up the base into her sex. The sight of her breasts moving back and forth, her form covered in sweat, her hair loose and free, her face flushed with red, and the sight of her pussy being filled by his cock while releasing more of her juices was enough to drive Naruto to the limit. It was not long before Naruto decided that now was the time for him to really speed up the pace between them as he thrust faster, harder and deeper into Tenten's pussy. And she was more than willing to show her happiness for what he was doing to her as she looped her legs around him and held on for dear life. Harder. Moire. Deeper. Naruto-kun. He then got an idea as he lifted Tenten to his now sitting form, and she was quickly able to adapt as she now moved her hips up and down on his own. The combined pleasure they got from one another and gave to one another made this position all the more enjoyable, and it allowed Naruto to reach back and play with Tenten's plump breasts and nipples with both hands and mouth. He also made sure to caress her back as well as her shoulder and her ass at the very same time. Tenten was more than willing to get into the act as she began to move her body up and down, allowing her to thrust her sex deeply down on Naruto's cock as he thrust up at the very same time. The pleasure that they got from this situation drove both the blonde Jinchuriki and the brunette weapon mistress to their limits, as both of them were really bringing up to the wall. They were moving at the same time and their pace was fast and furious as both of them were very much determined to reach their respective climax and bring their lover to the same moment. Both lovers were all moaning and crying out their pleasure to one another as each successful wave of pleasure hit their senses and nerves at the very same time. Moururi. Yes. Harder. Ah. Tenten wailed out her happiness with each action she took, moving her body up and down while Naruto was also making noises as he also thrust his hips up and down. Both of them timed their respective actions bit by bit and sent pleasure through their partners' bodies and felt their partner give them the very same pleasure at the very same time. It was all worth every moment in their minds, and they had no doubt that they were going to reach their limits. It was not long before they both reached their orgasm at the same time and cried out loudly at their release. Ah! Naruto held on to Tenten tightly as he felt his cock unleash another amount of his seed deeply into her sex, and the pleasure was all the more worth it. He could feel Tenten's inner walls milking his penis like a vice, and it was more than enough to make him feel like she was going to drain him dry. He could feel Tenten shiver in his arms, and when she looked at him he did not hesitate to kiss her deeply, making her moan out at the very same time as they held one another, as he also moved his hips a bit. That made Tenten moan once more, and he felt like he was also going to pass out and held on for dear life to his brown-haired lover and fellow Konoha ninja. As for Tenten herself, she felt like she was being filled to the brim as she felt more streams of Naruto's hot and thick cum flow into every part of her body at this very moment. She relished it and held on to Naruto as tightly as she could, pressing her shivering form to his own and enjoying the closeness that they had to one another. And when she was kissed by him, when she gazed at him, she responded in kind to the kiss as she moaned along with him into the kiss, and there was no doubt in her mind that what they had done was all worth every moment. Once they parted from one another, the two hugged one another as Naruto gently lowered Tenten to the bed of their place of rest, and soon they decided to get some sleep. They needed to rest after all that they had done with one another, and also take the time to relax and plan for what was going to be done tomorrow. The next day, Tenten woke up and she wondered why she felt slightly exhausted, and also the most telling thing that got her attention was the fact that she was utterly naked. It was not long before the memories of what she and Naruto had done together came back to her, and she could not help but feel a bit awed and amazed that they even did it. She could not help but feel a bit surprised about the discovery of Naruto's real status much earlier, but she did not mind it at all. She was very happy, as he had never become the demon so many back in the village had called him to be, and she had no doubt whatsoever that he was going to be a famous shinobi someday. She turned and saw Naruto come into their shelter and carrying some hot soup in one of their salvaged metal bowls, and while it was not the best smelling soup, the rich meaty smell there was good to her. She looked in and saw that it was a soup filled with chicken meat, no doubt from the wild chicken that was on the island, and there was also some wild herbs there. She smiled at Naruto and spoke to him gently. "Thanks for the meal, Naruto-kun." Naruto smiled warmly at the praise, and Tenten tasted the soup to find it good, and the meat was tender and certainly good to the taste buds with the gamey taste of wild fowl. She took in the food and felt her body feel a lot more relaxed as she hugged him when he sat next to her, enjoying the closeness between them. She knew that now was the right time for her to speak to Naruto about what they were going to do if and when they were going to be back in Konoha. "Naruto-kun, we need to talk about something." Naruto could tell that Tenten was in the mood for a serious conversation, and he knew that he had to be serious with her as well. "I know, last night was wonderful, and I promise that I will not treat it like a simple thing, even if it was the last thing I expected to happen between the two of us." Tenten could tell that Naruto was dead serious, and she knew that in all the time she had gotten to know him while the two of them were on the island, he was not the kind of person to joke on something that was serious to him. And she felt happy that he was taking this seriously, and she decided to speak her own mind. "I am happy about that. Last night was wonderful, and I will never forget what we did that night. And you know something? I would not mind it if we continued this relationship when we get home." Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and looked at Tenten with some measure of surprise. "Are you serious?" Tenten grinned and replied, "Yes, I am very serious. You know me, Naruto-kun, and I would never joke about something like this, and I am more than willing to make this relationship work out between the two of us. I know that it will not be easy, and until we are ready, we have to keep this secret, but I want this. So I want to know something." Naruto was not foolish, and those who think that he was stupid had no idea that he merely had a simple way to see the world, and he replied, "I will make this relationship work, Tenten-chan. If you really want this, then I will do my best to make it work for both of us. And you have my promise on that as well, on my word as the future Hokage. Believe it." Tenten smiled at that, and she could not help but hug Naruto, and she replied, "Then that is all I need to hear, and I hope that when we do it, I will hope that it will not become a problem at all for the two of us. And remember this, you might be a Jinchuriki, but you are not the demon, you are you, and I have no doubt that if it ever happens that you and I have a child, I have no doubt you would make a good father. And I will make sure that I will be as good a mother for our child, be it boy or girl." That served to make Naruto happy, as he and Tenten hugged one another for a while longer before going back to their day-to-day routines. Later, as Naruto got to work on the food, he looked at the wild rabbits that he had managed to catch and keep in a cage that he and Tenten made before. The rabbits were then killed and cleaned, then skinned, and were now roasting over the fire, and there next to him were 2 metal cups filled with water. Apart from the rabbits that were cooking above the fire, there was also a pot filled with hot water and some freshwater fish and wild herbs and spices. The soup was going to be more than welcomed by the two of them, as it would really be filling. As he cooked the food, He thought of Tenten, who right now was currently getting her clothes cleaned as well as taking a much-needed bath. He was tempted to go there and surprise her but decided against the idea since she was busy and did not want to be disturbed when she did her work and getting cleaned up. Naruto sighed a bit more. He moved the rabbits over the fire while stirring the pot, and it was at this point that the QB spoke to him. "Well now, you seem to be very much alive. You don't sound too happy. Whatever gave you that idea? As long as you don't die, I get to live, so why should I not be happy that you're still in the land of the living? I think that's more than enough incentive for me to keep you breathing. Only if I ever get the chance to be free will I kill you. Then all the more reason for me to not get killed then, and all the more reason that I get to collect your rent." "Touché. At any rate, it seems that at least I don't have to worry about you two lovebirds for a while now. Though I have to admit that the whole affair was pretty entertaining since you and that brown-haired woman had a lot of very interesting times on this island. Though next time, I suggest that you both stop with all of the mushy stuff since that always makes me gag somewhat since I prefer actions to words. If you two want to screw each other like rabbits in heat, then do it. Worry about all that love stuff after the whole thing." "Alright, fine. So what is it you want to talk to me about?" "Just wondering if you are serious about this whole relationship thing. I don't really care at all since this is between you humans, but I am just curious about it." "Yeah, I am serious, QB. If it ever happens that I get Tenten-chan pregnant, then I am going to be responsible. And before that does happen, I wanted to make this whole relationship work out between the two of us. And I will not let anything happen to either her or our baby no matter what anyone says." The QB was silent for a moment and then began laughing at that, apparently amused as far as Naruto could sense, but he was curious why there was also a feeling of satisfaction. "Good, well then I suggest you make the most out of it, and if you two do decide to get it on again here or back there in that village of yours, let me know. I was very much enjoying last night, but next time, tell me in advance so I can really get an idea on just how good it would feel." "What in the name of the kami are you talking about? You never bothered to learn more about the seal or your uniqueness as a Jinchuriki, do you, brat?" "Fine, but I hope you are paying attention and not playing dumb when I tell you this, because I don't plan on repeating myself for your benefit. This seal of yours might allow you to get my chakra, but it works both ways after all. I can see what you see, hear what you hear, and if I really work it up, feel what you feel. You have any idea how pleased I was when you and that babe did it last night? I haven't felt that in a very long time, and I can state that for once I don't mind being stuck in a human." "You mean you saw that between me and Tenten-chan?" "Naturally, and I have to say that you did pretty good for a young human, though I think that you could get some tips from that perverted sensei of yours. And I am not referring to that one who's always got his nose stuck in books of all things. Despite that man's antics, he does know a thing or two about pleasing women. At any rate, Brad, I am going to be very interested to see just what else you two lovebirds are going to do, and I might give you some advice on how to really make her scream in happiness. See ya, Brad." Naruto shook his head in annoyance and decided that this was one thing he was not going to tell Tenten. Kami only knew just how she was going to that. It was not long before Tenten arrived and she looked very nice, and she then told Naruto to let her take over with the cooking since he needed to take a bath and clean his clothes. Naruto did not argue and did just that, and when he came back clean and fresh, they both had their breakfast. Once that was over and done with, they decided to go and train to keep their skills and jutsu up to date. And when that was over, the two of them headed off to move and patrol the beaches to make sure that they were looking for any sign of a ship. Tenten was not alone, as she was accompanied by two of Naruto's cage bunshine who were going to working in two functions. The first was for one of them to tell Naruto if Tenten spotted a ship by disappearing to give the knowledge to the blonde shinobi, and the second would head off to light the signal fire while Naruto would meet with Tenten. And do the reverse if Naruto spotted the ship, with one telling Tenten and the other lighting the signal fire. It was only nearing lunchtime that Tenten spotted the sign that they were both soon going to be rescued. She spotted a sail and then spotted the ship that came with it. It was a rather large vessel but was not a cargo ship by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that it had the symbol of Konoha on it meant that the ship was specially commanded by their people back in Konoha. The brown-haired kunoichi was immediately happy and gave the binoculars to the cage bunshine, and soon it went off without a hitch. She did not have to wait for long as Naruto came on the scene just as they turned to see the thick and strong black smoke at the high hill on the island. That told them that the signal fire was now on, and all they could do was look at the ship and hope that the people on the ship were going to see them. As they looked towards the ocean, and through the salvaged binoculars that they now had, they saw the ship move towards them, and all they could do was watch. Their happiness only grew as the ship came ever closer, and they also spotted some familiar faces on the ship. It seemed that they were now going to be able to go home, and that meant that as soon as they got home, they were going to do a lot of things in private between the two of them. Epilogue. Naruto managed to get a chance to relax after the last mission that he was on with the others, and hoping to have some time to himself to sharpen his skills after getting a good deal of sleep, even if that meant getting rather early in the morning. something he used to dislike a great deal since he was a heavy sleeper. It had been at least 3 weeks since they had come back to Konoha, and both he and Tenten were able to finally relax while also working on another matter. That matter being none other than their current relationship. On the outside they remained separate though in friendly terms, but in private it was a different story as they were more than willing to have some very long and very much enjoyable quality time together. He still remained close friends with his time, and the same could be said for the others, though it was a bit different. He was a bit surprised about something that Tenten mentioned to him though. She had a plan in mind that involved Hinata and it was going to be all for him. His perverted side began to conjure up some very interesting images before he quickly decided to toss those aside. He cared for Hinata, and while he did find her to be rather attractive, he knew that he and her could not be together since he was with Tenten now, and he did not know where to start if he did tell Hinata about his relationship with her cousin's ex-boyfriend. Tenten told him that Hinata had a huge crush on him ever since they were little, and she even mentioned that he had stood up for Hinata when they were kids. That was the reason why she was always very shy around him and also rather tongue-tied, because he stood up for her, and now the crush had blossomed into deep love. He had no idea that this was the way that Hinata saw him, and he wondered just how she would react if she found out that he was in a relationship with Tenten. That was one prospect that he was not sure how to deal with, but he knew that he was going to have to change and adapt. No one else was aware of their relationship, and the only ones who did were actually none other than Kakashi, Guy, and also Tsunade. The Hokage was quite surprised by that, but she decided that since Naruto and Tenten were serious about their relationship, then she was not going to make an issue out of it. In fact, she was happy for Naruto. Kakashi could not help but smile a bit in amusement and tell Guy that now they were going to have to be used to fact that one of their respective students were now lovers and sweethearts. Guy himself was not bothered and personally told Tenten to make it work, and he was happy that she had found someone to care for after the end of her relationship with Neji. Though he warned Naruto to treat Tenten right or he was going to make an issue out of it. And he was really going to make it clear as well. Naturally, Naruto was more than willing to agree with Guy and do his best to honor his relationship with Tenten, much to her amusement and that of the two Jonin sensei and the Hokage. As he arrived at his house, he was surprised to notice that the door was open a bit. That was more than enough to tell him that there was someone in his house. That confused him a bit since he had not been expecting anyone to be coming into his house at this time of the night. He briefly thought that it was an assassin but decided not to jump to conclusions and gently opened the door. He then got out a kunai and moved into his home rather carefully. He moved into the living room and he spotted something on his table. It was something that he was quick to recognize as a bowl of hot food, which he was also quick to see as his favorite ramen. That bowl was not the only bowl, as there were several others, and the smell of the food was more than enough to tempt him to relax a bit. He then spotted a letter there next to the first bowl and decided to look at it and find out just what was written in the letter. He opened it and soon read the letter. Dear Naruto-kun, we brought these meals for you to enjoy for the night, and when I mean we and Hinata-chan. Make sure to eat up, and when you are done, come by your room. There is something there in your room which I think you are going to enjoy a great deal. Try to enjoy your dinner and make sure that you eat since you will need all the energy that you can get. Tenten-chan. That confused the heck out of Naruto as he decided to read the letter once more, and once he was done, he did it again to make sure that he was actually reading this right. He then placed it down and decided to just eat the food, and he did not need much encouragement as all of the ramen dishes that were there happened to be his favorite. He normally would have taken his time in eating his favorite food, but he decided to take in all that he could for now, as he was rather curious on what was it that both Hinata and Tenten were doing here and what was it that they had in his room. He got there, and to his utter surprise, there was Hinata and Tenten in his room, and they were actually not wearing their usual clothing. Instead they were both wearing, well, for the lack of a better term, nothing. The blonde Jinchuriki could not help but be wide-eyed at the sight of both Kunoichi in his room like this, and he could not help also but wondered just what was the reason they were even doing this in the first place. Hinata was blushing bright red at the moment, and he could not help but notice the way she looked fully exposed to him like this. It was taking a lot of his willpower not to look at her like this. The fact that Tenten was just as naked as Hinata was made the whole situation a heck of a lot more demanding than he would like. He finally got his mouth to work and spoke to Tenten first, since she was no doubt the one who had convinced Hinata to do this, since there was no way that Hinata Hyuga would have done this willingly as far as he knew, even if she did have a crush on him or not. Tenten-chan, what is going on here? Tenten smiled and replied, I decided to have a chat with Hinata-chan a few days before. I told her about what happened between you and me. She was not too happy with it, but I told her that you still cared about her and you were quite surprised about how she felt about you. I then asked her if she did not mind being with you even though we're together. In simple terms, Naruto-kun, I asked her if she did not mind sharing you with me so we do not have to be fighting one another. Why you did what? I told her if she did not mind sharing you with me. You should have seen her blush deeply when I suggested that to her. I told her that while I did feel sad about me taking your virginity from you, I knew that you were open and honest with your feelings, and you did tell me that you cared very much for her and even had a dream about her like this with a towel along with me in it. So I decided to ask her if she did not mind doing this so she can still be with you. Naruto was wide-eyed and looked straight at Hinata to try and see if she was actually serious in agreeing to this. One part of his perverted mind was utterly pleased with this turn of events, but he was not all that sure that this was actually happening to him in the first place. And he had to be sure that this was actually what Hinata wanted and she was not forced into it. Hinata-chan, and Naruto-kun. Did you really agree to this? I mean, I know that you loved me for a long time, but I don't want you to be forced into this or be seen as some sort of third wheel in this whole matter. Hinata spoke gently to Naruto with a sincere smile on her face. I want this. I am a bit sad that I was not with you, Naruto-kun, but I do not care. You were always standing up for yourself, and you might not remember this, but you stood up for me when I was still little. You stood up for me when those bullies tried to make me even more miserable, and even when you were being beaten you did not stop fighting back. You said that I can be someone strong even if you never knew me, and I was happy. And now I love you a great deal and I am willing to be with you in any way that I can. Even if this is something that I feel rather embarrassed about. Naruto could tell that Hinata was serious and he looked at Tenten and she smiled a bit. Told you, and besides, we're here and we're all adults by ninja law, so no sense not going ahead, right? He could see that he was not going to win this argument and nodded, much to the apparent happiness of both Tenten and Hinata as both girls moved to kiss him. Hinata was first and he could not help but feel that she can really kiss as Tenten began to lick his chest and suck on his nipples as well. One thing was fairly obvious to Naruto at this point, saying no to something like this was a bad idea.